So in this video, we're going to be adding instant death to our game. So instant death can happen when we fall into a void, or we land on some spikes, among other things. And other versions, you can get hit by laser beams and whatever else that's out there. And so that was the original game. Now if we take a look at ours, what we're going to have at the end of this video, I'm just going to look ahead. So the original, get rid of him. In the original, I had these blocked off so you couldn't go over. But now, we can die. And let's go again. We're going to get to the end of this real quick. Skip ahead. So I'm going to go fall down here. And I added some spikes. And I'm going to land on the spikes and die. So you'll notice that when we fall into voids, we don't have the explosion effect. But when we do land on spikes, we do have the explosion effect. So we're going to take both of those situations into account. So now that you've seen this, let's get started. Okay, so we have our previous project open. If you haven't been following along, you can go and download the last project from my GitHub. Links in the description. If you have been following along, open up your project. What we're going to be adding to this version is a new graphic, the spike, and we're going to be creating a new script called Instant Death Script. So we're going to move this out of the way, and what we're going to do is we're actually going to start with the code. So usually I always do the game objects and everything in code last, but this time we're going to do the code first. So inside of our scripts folder, we're going to just go into the root of that. We're going to right click and create a new C# script, and we're going to call it Instant Death Script. And then we're going to open that up in Visual Studio. And then we're going to replace the contents, so we're not going to type anything out. So give me 1 sec, let me let this finish real quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go into the folder where that's created, and I have my version already done, so I'm just going to copy and replace that, and then we'll go back over to Visual Studio and it should fill everything in. So this is a very short script, and you're going to see that this has an issue right here, but that's because we're also going to be making a change to the player controller script. So this script basically has two bools, and they're both public. One is called show explosion, which basically means if we fall into the void, we don't want to show the explosion, or we can have it so that we do show the explosion, like if we're falling on the spikes. We're also going to have a bool here called destroy enemies. So if we have enemies that fall into the void, or if you want, if they land on spikes, but we're not going to let them get destroyed when that happens. But in this game anyway, when you fall into the void, we want to have them be removed from the scene as well, so they're not just constantly falling into limbo. And then what basically this is going to be attached to a box collider. That'll be a trigger. So when that trigger gets touched, it's going to basically look at the tag, and we're going to be looking for players or enemies. And if it's a player, what we're going to do is we're going to call our defeat function that we have in the player controller, and we're going to pass this flag that's on the script, whether we're going to show the explosion or not when we get defeated. And if it happens to be an enemy that basically touches the trigger, we're going to see if the destroy enemies flag is set, and if it is, then we're just going to remove that enemy from the scene and destroy the object. So that's part one. Next part is what we're going to do is we're going to edit the player controller. And that is down here. We're going to take a look at what it looks like currently. Right here, I believe. So right now we have a start defeat animation function, which basically freezes the player, freezes the input, creates the explode effect, plays the sound, and then removes the player game object from the scene. But this gets called from the defeat function, and what this does is it actually invokes this function, and it has a half-second delay. So what we're going to do is we're going to make changes to this. So we're actually going to take it so it's not using it as an invoke. We're going to make it as a coroutine and then use that flag to be basically create the explosion or not. So let's go over here real quick and hold on. Okay, so we're going to switch over to this. So these are the changes that are going to be made into the player controller script. So we're going to just start with the defeat function. So I'm going to send this over and send this over. So what we're going to do is now we're going to have a parameter that's a Boolean, and it's going to be called explode. We're going to default it to true. And we're also going to make this function public. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pass that explode parameter over to our start defeat animation function that's going to be called as a coroutine. And then we're going to send this over, which is the start defeat. And we'll just save that. And so we're going to get that Boolean from here, and we convert it to an IEnumerator, so it can be a coroutine. And that half-second delay that we were passing as a parameter to invoke, we're going to just yield here for that half second. And we're going to do the same thing as before. We're going to freeze the input, freeze the player. But when we're going to check and see if the explode is true. And if explode is true, then we're going to create the explosion prefab and set that in motion. And then after that, we're going to play the sound and destroy the player. And if there is no explode, then this won't get called, and we'll just play the sound and destroy the player. So we can go over to here. The changes have been imported. And so now you can see this is what it is. And if we go back over to our instant death, now our defeat function is okay. So when we pass our show explosion to that, this will basically trigger whether to show that or not. So then we're going to go back over to here. Bring in the changes and no more errors. So that's basically all there is to the scripting. So now what we're going to do is we're going to have these things we're going to use that script, the instant death. We're going to make changes to our scene. So there's obviously many different ways that we can take into account how to do the instant death and everything. And that's, I find, for the project I'm working on, the easiest way of doing it. So I'm going to now actually before we do that, we're not going to bring that over yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to create, to alter our scene, we're going to create an empty here, we'll reset this transform, we're going to call it instant death. And this we're just going to bring up here after the boundaries, and we're just going to, this is basically just going to group our instant death triggers together, or game objects. So off of here, we're going to start with the spikes. So I'm just going to create another empty here, and we're going to call it death spikes. But before we can actually do anything with this, we're going to import the graphic, which is what I should have did first. So we're going to go to the graphics here, and I'm going to bring up that folder, actually. And then hopefully my computer doesn't hang like it did before. Oh, good. Explorer was hanging before. So now we have our spike here. Now we're going to make some changes to our spike. First thing we're going to do is we're going to change the mesh type to full rect. And then we're going to change the pivot to the bottom center, or in this case, they just call it bottom on this screen. And then we're going to change the filter to point no filter, no compression, apply that, and we're look at the sprite editor, and we're going to see our pivots down here in the middle. And then we can close that. So now that we have our spike, now going back over to our game object, we're going to add on 3 things to this. The first thing is going to be a sprite renderer. Now you could have just dragged that spike in there, but I'm just going to do it piece by piece. And then we're going to add on the box collider. And then we're going to drag on our script, our instant death script. Cool. So spike, we're going to start with the graphic. I'm going to take this, we're going to drag that on there. And then actually what we'll do is we're going to bring this over just so we can see what's going on as we make the changes. So right now our spike is here, you don't really see it. And so we're going to put that on layer 10. So right now you can see it's one little spike. Now with all of our graphics, they're a little tad small, so we're going to bump up its scale to 1.5 on the X and the Y. So there's our spike, a little bit bigger now. And it's on layer 10. What we're going to do is we're going to change draw mode to tiled. And then we're going to change the width to 0.8 and the height's going to stay at 0.16. So you can see now it's got like a row of 5 spikes here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to change the location of that. And I already have all this computed out. And we're going to put the spikes down here after our last, our little transition here off of the broken highway. So the position is on the X is going to be negative 1.4 and the Y is going to be negative 1.14. So here's our spikes down here. And so for our box collider, I'm just going to reset that real quick. So zoom in here, you only got this one little box here on the one spike. So we're going to change the size on that to 0.8 and 0.16. And Y actually, for some reason, doesn't look right. But oh, maybe I missed that part. Anyway, so basically the box cutter is going to be around the spikes. So you're going to change the size of it and the Y, so the box is going to be around that. And then we're going to make it a trigger. And on here we will show the explosion, so we're going to check off show explosion on the instant death script. So let's save that one. Let's just take a look at that in action real quick. Let's play it. Just get rid of this guy. Get rid of that guy. Get rid of him. Get rid of him. Get our one up. And I'm just going to land here. And let's see what happens. Oh, and I died instantly, and the explosion effect. So that's the first kind. Now the other kind, what we're going to do is we're going to add some triggers along here so that basically if we come off of this part of the broken highway, we're going to fall into oblivion and die. So to do that, I'm going to move this out of the way real quick. We're going to go onto our instant death here and create another empty. Move that up. We're going to call it Death Fall 1. And on Death Fall, all we're going to do on this is we're going to have a box collider. And we're not going to change the scale or anything like that. And then we're going to add on our script, instant death. Now on this, we're going to have it so that we can destroy the enemies. Okay. So the first instant death, maybe I should bring this over so we can see it as we're doing it here. Okay, so our first instant death, we're going to position that at negative 14.85 and then 0.86. And then we're going to change the size of the collider, and we're going to make it a trigger. And that's going to be 2.25 for the offset on the X and 0.084 on the Y offset. And then the size is going to be 5.15, and the Y is going to be 0.072. So now we have this trigger here that's basically little underneath of where this part of the broken highway is, and it's over here to the edge. So, and then that's for that one. And so we're going to just duplicate that. So I'm going to highlight it, Control D it, rename it to Deathfall 2. And just drag that above that. And then we're going to change the properties of the second one. So now the second one is going to be positioned at, let's make sure that's the one we're on. Yep. So this one's going to be at negative 10.35. and the y is going to be negative 1.12. And the offset for this one on the x is going to be negative 0.02, and on the y it's going to be 0.074. The size on the x is going to be 9.7, and the y is going to be 0.092. So this one basically encompasses this whole long area here. So now we have our two death balls. I'm going to highlight both of those, and now you can see them. Those are our two death balls there. And so what we also have to do, we can't get to it right now because we have these two walls that are basically blocking us in. So we're going to disable wall left 1 and 2. So I'm going to turn those off. So we can save that. Now we're going to take a look at it in action. Let's play it. So let's do the first death ball. So I'm going to jump here. So there, I basically died right there. So that's the first one. Let's go check out the second one. I'm going to come over here, I'm going to jump it. And I died right there too. So now, I'm going to show you that there's things that you would have to fine-tune in the end before you release something like this. So let's say, okay, I got the magnet beam, right? So here's one of the things. So this is part of why it's so long. So I'm just going to sit there. And there I died, right? We're going to go down to the bottom, the next level. Let's see what the problem is. So I have my magnet beam. I'm just going to kill that dude right there. Like that. Switch to that. And I just died. Why? Because I just hit the bottom one. So, and you also see the bottom of the highway there isn't filled in. So that's one of the things. So that's one of the level design aspects you got to take into consideration when you have all these little tools and everything to get you through the level. So I'm gonna die again real quick. I want to start this over. So there's another thing that you need to also take into account for when you're designing, building this like a level like this out. So I'm not gonna kill this dude. I'm gonna get past this guy. Actually gonna get past this guy too. Get past here. I want these guys to follow me. So you have the camera transition right here. Those guys should have been frozen. So that's also something you have to take into consideration, but that wasn't what I really wanted to do. That was half of what I wanted to do. So I want the Hemadomas to follow me. So come on, follow me. Okay. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to jump over. So there, you saw that one? Well, they pushed me into it, but destroy enemies wasn't set on that trigger, and so they can basically jump into those spikes and nothing will happen to them. So anyway, that's the end of the video. So that's instant death. Most of the time was basically just making changes to scene. So it's a very short script that you can use in your game or your version of this. And we also be able to show the explosion or the not explosion, destroying enemies, which actually that is what I forgot right here. Destroy enemies. So let's just go over here. I want this guy to follow me. So they should be able to jump over here. If we watch over here, they should jump over, and you see they disappeared. They're gone. Now we're really at the end of the video. So if you like it, give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or need any help or anything like that, link to my Discord servers in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed, just subscribe. You can see whenever I put out new stuff. It's pretty much like once a week for the most part. And have a good day. I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.